Hey, Holy Business. I love that every week we're talking to a leader from so many different backgrounds, industries, and worlds. And today I have an interesting guest that I've been excited to interview that just splits her time between so many different hats. I met Carmen Simpson this past February, and you can't help when you meet Carmen but just be enthralled in her calming and encouraging presence. But I quickly learned that beyond all of that, she's a change maker, and she creates relentlessly, develops through humility, and she has an openness with her team. She also has an intense passion for her church community, as her husband is the lead pastor of City Church in Savannah, Georgia. But wait, there's more. She and her husband sought to evangelize through their work, and in their time in Savannah, she and her husband have launched 7 different companies, with Shift Creative Designs being their newest organization that has multiple successful brand offerings like Beach Cat Studios and The Nerd Life, and it brings functional art to everyday life. They're now handing that entrepreneurial vision down to their children, and they work as a family to build their own brand legacy. An additional interesting part of this story is when they planted in Savannah, God called them to do that debt-free and to support their teams in interesting ways. So they actually use these business opportunities to also build their ministry team. It's such a cool conversation. She's such an uplifting and just vision-driven woman. And I can't wait for you to catch my conversation with Carmen Simpson. Well, Carmen, it's so good to have you today. I'm so excited. We're chatting, and I feel like this conversation's been such a long time coming, but
yes,
I'm sure it will be worth the wait.
Yes, I hope so.
I know. I always want to start with you, especially by saying I'm super jealous you live on Tybee and have that beach life going every day, but that's fine. I'll come visit anytime. Anytime.
The beauty of it is that Charleston is real similar to Savannah.
That's true.
And I don't know how often you make it to the beach, but we lived in Savannah for about a decade before moving out here. And our life was like in a 2-mile radius in Savannah. Yeah. I loved it. It was so great. And my husband was the one that wanted to move out here first. And I was like, I can't get my head around it. And eventually, as the kids grew up and kind of life changed a little bit, we just made a list of if this, then that. And we prayed that, and it all worked out. So I'm so grateful. It's a beautiful place. So
I love that. And Tybee and Savannah are so close, but they are like worlds away when it comes to lifestyle, I feel like.
Yes,
for
sure.
So but you're not from that area at all.
No.
How did you and Jim get to Savannah, get to City Church, all that?
Okay, so I was born in Kansas, and Jim was born in Wyoming. We met in Alabama. We've lived in Missouri, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. I think those are all the states that we've lived in. And we were youth pastors for about a decade before moving to Savannah. And just one day, randomly out of nowhere, Jim was like, I think we're going to plant a church, and it's going to be in a coastal town. And I'd never even heard the language plant a church. This was like years and years ago.
Wow.
And he had been like looking at it, considering it, like, wherever that came from, like I was not on board, because I was like, no, we're going to be youth pastors forever. Like I love student life. I love ministry to the young people. I love investing in next generation. So, and he did too as well, but all of it to say, I wasn't on board. And, it wasn't until years later, he said that to me when we just had Isaac, our oldest, was like 2 years old. So fast forward, to having my third pregnancy. So we already had Isaac and Caitlin. I was pregnant with Zoe, and something just dropped in my heart. Like, we're going to plant a church, and we're going to have no money, because you don't have money when you plant a church,
Right. That's true.
There are ways to go about it where you take out loans or, that type of thing. And I just kind of embraced this idea, like, it's going to be like a missionary lifestyle. Like, we're going to have to make ends meet and see where it comes from. So I started like going through things, giving away, like selling, minimizing our lives. And then it was during my pregnancy with Zoe that it dropped in my heart. And then he was born 6 weeks early on his deathbed without us knowing. We had no idea there was an issue with the pregnancy. And long story short, probably a whole nother conversation for a whole nother hour, another time.
Yeah.
But he was supposed to not even live 24 hours. Doctors intervened as much as they could for 2 weeks straight. We planned a funeral and took him off of life support at 2 weeks old. And he opened his eyes and took a breath, and he's 16 years old now. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, but in that process, we did not live in Savannah, but we were rushed to Savannah because it was the nearest hospital that could do something for him. And then we lived at the Ronald McDonald House here in Savannah for about 2 months. And before we could take him home. And it was in the thick of it with the doctors that it just, we knew for sure we were coming to Savannah and we were planting a church. And the two main things were we were going to be as true to preaching the word of God as we could, and then having engaging worship. And those were kind of like the two things that we definitely knew we wanted to do. But that's how we came to City Church in Savannah. And the whole team came, and with no ties to Savannah whatsoever, like from the dirt up, we just came.
Really? Because that's interesting. Yeah. That's not usually how that goes.
Yeah. And that's something that's important to me, is that it's not a break off from another church. It's not a church split. It's not something, it was completely unrelated to anybody or anything or any ministry in Savannah. And all of our launch team came from out of the city and out of the state.
Wow.
And when we went to church boot camp, we called it church planting boot camp, they told us, look, your launch team is usually gone within 14 months of the project starting. And we were like, no, we are going to break that mold. Not us. Like, we are in life forever with these people. And sure enough, they were like, as a scaffolding is put up to build a building, when the building is built, the scaffolding comes down. Like, that's your launch team.
That's actually a great way to explain that.
Yes. And I think it helps relationally, knowing it's not a tearing away of relationships necessarily, but it's just kind of the nature of it. That launch team, kind of just dismantles after a while, and the thing is good to go. But yeah, about 14 months into, one by one, each family kind of peeled away, wanted to move back to be with family, wanted this or that or whatever. And, but we were sure we were going to break that mold, that we'd be calling up the church planting people and being like, guess what? We did it. We couldn't do that.
I actually love that you said that, because I feel like in business startup, it's very much the same. As you start to make changes into establishment, those startup mentalities, some of them can't shift like that. They're designed to do a special project, and then their time is over. But how do you walk through the emotion of that as a leader? Because it's really hard when you've been like in the dirt together, in the trenches.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of knowing your boundaries and knowing your place in it all, which is really hard, because sometimes you're not self-aware of that. And so you're blaming something else or someone else, and really you just need to own your own junk. But the reality is, it was really, really a strong theme through church boot camp. I keep saying that, but that's not what they called it. Anyway, it was to us. So
it's totally what it is.
We learned so much in that time, but they really, really drove home the fact that if you make the vision plain, then it's easy for people to be on or off board. So that, having known of and experienced and seeing other church splits, church breaks, whatever, it felt like such a word of hope. That's like, oh, this is how you don't have heartache in church. All you have to do is make everything very plain, make it very transparent, very, all the truth up front, up forward. Yeah. And so I went into very hopeful that, okay, this is the remedy. And so we won't experience hurt from people, and we won't also hurt people. Yeah. And then everything, when it's a startup, when it's new, is super exciting. So we had tons of support, and we grew very quickly, and it was very, very thrilling and exciting. And it just takes time walking alongside people before things happen, and you want to avoid it. And, but I think it just goes back to, now, let me finish my thought. It goes back to owning your own self, your own junk, and knowing your boundaries, and being self-aware of how are you operating under stress, under frustration, under anger? Like, how are people experiencing you? You and I went through some conversation like that back at the retreat that we met at. Like that's such a helpful tool, is knowing how people experience you when you're not at your best.
Yeah.
And so that being said, Savannah is a very transient area with military, with jobs and all that. So, some people leave the church because of a job or because of military, or because their family moves or whatever it would be. But then there are people who leave out of hurt and out of disgust or frustration or whatever. And that's hard because I went into this, I know Jim went into this knowing, hey, we don't want to be the source of someone's conversation in a decade of why they're not in church.
Yeah.
But ultimately I can't control that. I can manage myself, and that's what I can do. And those instances give you opportunity to work on yourself.
I'm sure. So I have so many questions. With City Church, how did you come up with the name City Church?
So I homeschool my kids. Okay. When Isaac, our oldest, who's 22, he was born, we were leaving the hospital with him, and he was born in Missouri. And my husband turned to me and was like, I want you to homeschool our kids. And I was like, well, I can't get my head around it. Like, I just need sleep, You're
like, we're literally holding the baby.
I know. Like, I literally have no idea what I'm doing right now. So how will I know when it's time for school? But I just was like, can we pause and we'll just come back to the conversation like in 5 years. And by the time Isaac was 5, I looked at it like I wanted to be side by side with Jim in ministry. Yeah. So I could either, and we worked as youth pastors, your ministry is at nighttime. You're up late with the teenagers. It's very exhausting. And so I was like, look, I can be at home at 7:30 every night, putting our kids to bed, and Jim can be doing ministry by himself, or we can homeschool and adapt our schedule to be what we want it to be and be involved as a family. And that's what I chose, was just like the convenience of scheduling. Anyway, so all that being said, this is a long way to answer what you're saying, what you asked. But, so one day in homeschool, we were going over like, terms and definitions and where words come from, and like ancient Egypt and hieroglyphs. And, one of the oldest hieroglyphs, the word for city was, the example they gave it was like when someone was walking along a path and then there would be something etched in a stone, with a cross with a circle around it. It signified to the traveler, up ahead, you're going to come to an intersection. That's the main part of the city where cultural, political, and religious decisions are made. And that's what was done in the city. And, I don't know if you remember, in the early 2000s, like it was really trendy to have super different names for churches,
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of what I was looking for. Like, what's the cool, trendy word that we can have for a church? But it just hit me so hard that I called Jim in the middle of school that day. And I was like, City Church, like the middle of the city, the crossroads where political, cultural, religious decisions are made, in the daily grind with life with people, So anyway, that's where City Church came from. And that's actually our logo, is a cross with a circle around it, kind of in an artistic rendition of it.
I'm sure it would be no less than artistic knowing your family, but that's really cool. And how cool that the kids were kind of a part of that in their learning. That's really amazing. So City Church, Savannah, all these things. Clearly Jim is very visionary, and you're artistic and really involved with the family, and you started not just a church, but several other things. How did that leap come about between church and business and brands and creation?
So when we were coming into Savannah, we knew we were going to be downtown. There is a street called Liberty Street. And you cannot start a church north of Liberty Street, which is where we wanted to be. And the red tape is because churches don't bring income in. Basically, they want businesses down there to bring revenue. This is what we were told back in 2010 when we were looking for spaces. So we kind of ran into that red tape. So besides that by nature of Savannah, you have a lot of businesses that then have lofts or apartments up above where they operate. So then we ran into the noise ordinance. Like, no, you on Sunday morning, it'll be too loud. Like noise ordinance, red tape, location red tape. And let me back up a little bit to where when we knew we were going to plant a church and not have any money, Jim started an audio visual company, and he did this so that he can provide income for our family. And then we just Jim is very gifted in strategy. So he was thinking strategically, how do I put food on the table? Yeah. And then he's very gifted in audiovisual and technology. So he just kind of took what he was good at and his passion and turned it into seeking out how he can make money on it. So what we did is and he named that company Shift Creative. That's where the name came from for our company today. So, and his idea was, we're in a area in South Georgia where a lot of churches that were still using the clear overhead projector sheets with the projector.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They needed updating.
Taking it way back.
Yep. They needed updating. They needed new sound systems, projectors, all this. So the idea of hey, make a shift. Let's make a shift in how you're being creative. Not just that, but he worked in restaurants downtown on Broughton Street in Savannah, home theater, so he worked in homes, restaurants, and churches. But the majority of his business at that time was for South Georgia churches who were updating all of their equipment. Anyway, so Shift Creative, audiovisual started, and we hired the staff for the company and paid them, but we doubled that staff was the Sunday morning staff for City Church when we were opening City Church. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So the church couldn't pay them, but the company could. And that was very upfront in the conversation about who we were hiring, that we worked Monday through Friday as a company and then Sunday as a church. So that's how it came to be. And, I think I've forgotten your original question because I was trying to go from church to business, kind of how they're related.
No, that's exactly what I was asking. And I mean, that's just such an interesting concept, because I think sometimes with both of those, there's got to be this great divide in a lot of minds. And you were dealing with a team that were both church staff and weekly employees in the business, and you made it work. You leveraged that.
And, I think we all have these factors that play into why we decide what we decide at any given season in life.
Yeah.
So Jim and I got married with no debt. That was a prerequisite of my dad 25 years ago when we got married, no debt. And then we got into debt. We just were kind of dumb. And so we got into debt. And then when we got out of that debt, Jim was like, I'm not going back. So we came into Savannah with our company and with City Church going, our hard line in the sand is we're not going into debt. Now you have to have a house mortgage, you know what I mean? Yeah. But the way that we manage our money, part of the filter of our decisions was, does it put us in debt or can we do this debt free? So Jim worked really hard at the company so that we could do church debt free. And to this day, we don't have a mortgage on a church building. Wow. It's debt free. So that's, again, a whole nother hours long conversation. Yeah. But we've had to say no to a lot of things and work really hard in order to accomplish that.
That's just a really cool concept. It's just such a unique approach. And when we first talked about all these things you were doing, and also I should say that you're very approachable and you don't lead the conversation with all these things y'all are plugged into. So it's kind of like a slow burn to uncover these layers of Carmen. But I just was fascinated the more and more I learned. And then you started these businesses, and I know that you've kind of set Proverbs 16:9 as kind of the forefront of everything you do. Could you dig into that a little bit? Because I think it is hard when people are trying to connect scripture. Maybe it might be the first time in their business that they're doing that. Yeah. How does that guide you?
So I love Proverbs. I usually try to go through a proverb of the day corresponding with the day of the month. That's not a brand new thing. People do that. But I love Proverbs because it's like, here's the best way to live, then you kind of figure that out. So, but Proverbs 16:9, we make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps, is kind of in a nutshell, in different versions word it differently. It's really cool. But, kind of finding the balance between not being the person who's like waiting for the Lord to drop the job or the opportunity in your lap as you just sit here and do nothing, And then also not being the person who has all these plans and no room for God to move. So it's like that dichotomy of feeling that tension, when you really want something to go through, when you really want a business deal to go through, like not forcing it or making it happen so much to where it's not the right thing, or not being lazy and just sitting around and waiting for the opportunity. So finding the balance within what we can do and how we can do that. So, we know that we make our plans and we set out our calendar and we do our to-do list, but giving room to like yield to what God is doing. And some doors that have closed, we really, really wanted opened. But then we see in hindsight, oh, this other opportunity actually works out more in line with who we are and what we're doing, that came along after that door closed. I'll tell people, if I'm trying to partner in business, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to knock on your door until you tell me no and tell me to go away. But I might be silent for a month. I'm going to come back and knock again. So
I love
it. So just kind of seeking that out.
Yeah. I even feel like that's kind of woven into your slogan. I know it's short, but you can see where it comes right out of that. Will you share what that is?
Yeah. So our company is Shift Creative Designs. So the slogan is make a shift, be creative, design your life. So you have the choices in your daily life. And as you look at strategy in your own life to make a shift, like what's not working, what can be working, be creative, think out of the box, which is what Jim did when he was like, I'm going to start a company so we can build a church, because, it is true that pastors can take out loans and they can have their year's salary paid for, and they can take out loans on a building. Like that is one avenue, but we did not want to do that. So the creative thing was, he's like, I can do this and I can make money on it, and then doubling the business staff to be the church staff. And then design your life. Like, what do you want your life to be like? Yes, you, as a believer, as a Christian, you pray and you ask the Lord, but like take a chance, take a risk, test it out, design your life the way you want it to be.
That's so good. Now with designing your life, it's gone beyond Shift Creative and City Church at this point. What else have you dipped your toes into the water of as a family?
So, City Church Savannah grew to, then we opened City Church Pooler, which now this day is called Citizens Church. It's a great, great group of people. So we tried to do the approach, like when you walk into a Chick-fil-A, you know what you're getting no matter where you go. Yeah. So there was a year's time where Jim pastored both City Church Savannah and City Church Pooler. And even though they're, 25, 30 minutes away from each other, life is very different in each of the areas. And so the needs of the people attending the church are different. So much so that like dentist offices, they have one in Pooler, one in Savannah, or, at medical practices and different companies, they've seen that they need to open in Pooler and in Savannah. So when we saw that it shouldn't be mirrored the same, because of the people and the demographics and everything. So then we raised up a pastor who took that over. And then instead of being a church location for City Church, it became a church plant separately. They're awesome. We love them. They're doing really great. So it's now Citizens Church. And that was because people were driving from the far reaches of Savannah into downtown to go to church. So we did that, trying to give them a place to worship. And then, going back to what I was saying about the red tape in the city, not being able to open a church. Yeah. So we opened what we were going to use as a storefront for Jim's audiovisual company. It turned into a coffee shop. So we opened City Coffee in the front of the storefront, and then City Church Savannah rented the back warehouse space. So it gave the city what they want. The city wanted revenue. We put a business down in there in the storefront, coffee shop. So it met the demands of what it needed to be, and it gave us an outlet to do what we were here to do. Yeah. So City Church Savannah, City Church Pooler, City Coffee, those were the three that we started up. And then we were on a 60-day revolving lease that lasted 3 years at that space.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And we couldn't afford the space originally. And I told the realtor, I can't afford this. He said, well, what can you afford? I was like, it would really offend the owner if I told you what we could afford. And he's like, just ask, you never know. It was half of what they were asking. And he said, give me 10 minutes. I'll call you back. And he called me back and was like, okay, we'll do it. Let's draw up a lease. And so that was kind of the thing was like, you guys can be here, but we'll give you 60 days notice to be out if another higher paying renter comes in. So it took 3 years for that higher paying renter to come in. And, it was a restaurant that came in. Unfortunately, they did all of this remodel and were open very, very short time. It was like less than a month. I don't know. And it now is a restaurant, our original church space is, but we didn't own that space. Yeah. Anyway, so then we had to relocate. And when we relocated, we separated City Coffee into its own building and rebranded to Blue Door Coffee and Waffles.
Okay.
And simply Blue Door, we were like, we wanted people to find the Blue Door and know that's where we were at. Cause I love it. Downtown Savannah is like hustle and bustle. So just go find the Blue Door and that's where we're at. And so then, so that's Blue Door. We commissioned a church plant in Kenya in a men's prison. That was beautiful. That resulted after a missions trip that my husband and my son went on. They broke ground for a church in a men's prison, and we were able to commission that and bless that. And we don't stay connected with that because we knew it would be difficult across the world. We're like, the things that you guys need. So we just were like, and then let's see, what else did we do? We've got Blue Door, and then, and then Shift Creative Designs is our company now. We were trying to see what trendy words work. And so we were like coastal creations, no, that sounds too Southern home. We're not really just Southern home. So we were throwing things around and I said, what about Beach Cat Studios? Because we'll get to that in a minute, I'm sure, but our cat just stays on the beach path and people know her as the beach cat. Her name is Mittens, and they give her all kinds of names. Like families will be like, hey, we came back to see Oreos. We don't know her name, but we call her Oreos.
So great.
And then we threw around, like my husband and my kids, they love all the nerd gaming, nerd life. So we're like, well, we make nerd products, so we could be the nerd life. No, we're more than that. So we landed on Shift Creative Designs again, like be creative, make a shift, design your life. And then we decided to put our products organized into these different product lines. So we have Beach Cat Studios, the Nerd Life, Mythic Life, the Southern Life, or, different things. So, yeah.
Before we get to that, because I want to dig into that, and there's some cool things going on with incorporating the kids that I love so much. Sure. But you just mentioned in the list of building all of these things, it's easy to look at what you've built and see all these things God has had his hand in, right? And then and your community feel that as well. But you've mentioned multiple things that you've had to kind of let go of along the way too. And I don't think that's always easy when you're growing. Is there are key components that you might even want more than will ever become of them. How do you and Jim work through God maybe saying, all right, that piece isn't for you to keep, City Church Pooler, like figuring out what is better for the community, letting go of certain business components that weren't what they should become so that other things could flourish. How do you work through that process?
So it has been a process through understanding what our leadership strengths are. And Jim's leadership strengths are different enough from mine that we can balance each other out and help each other in that. And then, so I would say understanding what your leadership strengths are, which you have to fail forward in that. Honestly, you don't get it perfect. You have to be able to assess yourself and grow through that. And then, really just having a filter that is your decision-making process that's in place, that says yes or no before the opportunity comes up. So for example, knowing that we were not willing to take on debt, we passed up a lot of building opportunities, not to build a building, but the really cool buildings that are downtown that we really wanted to be in. In that process, then is there practical stuff? Is there parking for people to come? Or are they going to have to guess on parking week to week and walk 5 blocks, So some of those practical elements that become your filter for decision-making process, like I'm willing to do this, but not this. This is like where I'm willing to flex, or or not flex. So, and then being humble enough to receive feedback from people in your life that are trusted counsel. So there's a really amazing businessman that's in the area that Jim goes to for counsel, that just sees things on a whole new level than he does business wise. And so he'll say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with him about this and just see, because other people can see around the corner that you can't based on their strengths, and where they've been. So I would say, it really is a process of understanding what you bring to the table and how willing you are to relate through the conversations and manage your emotions about it. And that's just different for everyone.
Sure.
It's hard.
How does that work with community? Because it's not just about you and Jim owning a company. There's a whole community involved in a lot of what you do. Yeah.
So with community, there's the aspect of like, where do we need to be in relation to community, whether it's business or church, like, so kind of geographically looking, like what makes the most sense.
Sure.
Secondly, having trusted counsel around you. So for the church, that would be the elders. For Jim, having the straightforward conversations about what really is the wisest, and being able to have those conversations. And then with the company, just being able to take a yes and a no from each other, and it's not always easy. It's not always, what you want to hear, but I don't know. It's like, you have to keep in mind that it's a process. There's no finish line really.
That's
it's
really
a process. Good. Yeah. It's a timeline, not a finish line.
That's actually a great way to put it. I love that. It's a timeline, because I mean, anyone who's goal oriented and driven, you're kind of like, when will we get there? Whatever the ethereal there is.
So there's something that's written on my chalkboard wall over here. That I write a characteristic every week up there. And it's patience versus restlessness, accepting a difficult situation without giving a deadline to remove it. And I was like, that really is a good definition of patience.
That's really good. And that's why I'm really bad at it. My constant work. Ooh.
Well, I mean,
that's really good.
But then the balance is, you have to have deadlines with work, with business. Yeah. Like, we have deadlines that are in front of us. That's like, we have to meet these deadlines or we don't get the opportunity for that job again, so like, you do have to have deadlines with tasks. But then I think like managing your inner heart and your inner mind, like that's where that's where patience grows.
That's so true. So, okay. So we've talked about all those things. Now you have been able, now that you've let go of some things, to kind of fail forward, to your point, and build these really cool brands, if you will, underneath Shift Created. So you mentioned Nerd Life, you mentioned Beach Cat Studios. What else? What are you doing with these things? Yeah.
Okay. So we, yes, our brand products are Beach Cat Studios, which I have a couple of products here. And so this is okay. This is an example of a handbag that's made out of wood. And this is a picture of a zinnia flower. The wild zinnia is the Tybee official flower. So these are in Wild Zinnia Beach Boutique, which is a store down on the south end of the island. And they carry those. So we made that product custom for them because their store is Wild Zinnia. So we are in that would be an example of Beach Cat Studio design. So it'd be purses, earrings, things like that. Kind of what the ladies like. Here's a pair of, this is Beach Cat Studios, but it's also the Nerd Life, because these are pink Millennium Falcon earrings.
I love it.
And they're fun because they're acrylic glitter on one side. These are, let's see if I can get that. These are butterfly earrings.
Oh my gosh, look at that. Yeah.
These are made of wood and they're painted. So the Beach Cat Studios life is kind of like what all the ladies like. And we have that in Mermaid Crossing, which is a store down on South Tybee, the Lighthouse gift shop here on the island. We do the farmers market on Monday nights from 4 to 7 at the base of the lighthouse. And, we try to stay connected in the community that way. And then the Nerd Life, this is my husband and my kids do like the long form games, like the tabletop games. So we have one table that's in our family area that's just for gaming. And then we have a separate table to eat at because sometimes the games have to remain out for quite some time. So he designed things that are for that Nerd Life. And so this is a coaster that he designed. So this would just be like a bard. He burned this on the cork. And then here, the piece of leather is missing. It's a really nice piece of leather that goes in here. It's removable so that you can wash it. But then you hold your dice here. So you have your coffee or your water. You've got your dice. So that's your coaster for the Nerd Life. And then also the dice box right here that holds your dice and a pin. We have a couple of different designs. This is the logo for Nerd Life.
That's when you like walk in, you're walking up to the gaming table and you look real serious. Like, yes. I'm here to win.
Yeah.
Here to win.
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm here to win, and I'm here for my products to look good while I dominate you. That's kind of what we want. That's kind of what we want people. So someone, a man was walking past our booth at the farmer's market, and he wanted his wife to buy a purse. He's like, that is a talk about peace. Like, he wanted her to get it so people would talk about her purse. And then one more thing is I would say for the Nerd Life is, my husband does, I don't even know. I didn't even try to practice this, but, so he burns these pieces of wood and paints them and makes art. That's Deadpool. And then we have a Wolverine for the Deadpool Wolverine movie. But, anything from earrings, let me get my thoughts back together. So Beach Cat Studios, Nerd Life. We have Nerd Life products down in some of the nerd stores in downtown Savannah. Nerdheim is a store on Broughton that we're in.
You do like some Comic-Con stuff too with that stuff, don't you?
We did our first Savannah Comic-Con, and we're looking to do more. Next weekend, Jim and I will travel to Gainesville, Florida, and we'll be at the Gainesville, Florida Comic-Con, while my daughter and daughter-in-law are on Savannah Riverfront at Crafts on the River. It happens the fourth weekend of each month. So we are plugged into markets, stores, local businesses. We're in a local business group where we provide like keychains, where this is like a koozie, like we make leather koozies. This one just says Tybee Island.
Oh, that's cool.
It's braided together. We found out how to braid them together rather than sewing them. So it's a quicker process, but, just we're in boutiques across Tybee, Savannah, Hilton Head, Bluffton. So yeah,
that's really cool.
A really cute museum in Aiken, South Carolina. They carry our stuff. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And you showed me, okay, so you had that purse, like not the one with the zinnia, but you had like the first one.
Yeah, the wooden purse.
Yeah, when I met you. Yeah. And we were all like amazed by this handbag.
Yeah.
Which kind of is a nice segue into this part because that involves the kids getting involved in the product line now.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that and how you started to incorporate the family?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, the purpose of starting this company was to pass off to the next generation. So my daughter wants to be a stay-at-home mom, but have an outlet for her art. So eventually own a store where she can create her art. So we were like, well, let's start that now and work out the kinks so that when she's ready for that, she's kind of good at what she's doing as far as the business. She's brilliant as an artist. We just want to round out kind of the business side of it.
Yeah.
Our son, so I have 4 kids, I should say. So Isaac is 22, Caitlin is 18, Zoe is 16, and Ezra is 12. 12, yes. Okay. I didn't think, is he 12 or 13? Because he's growing so fast these days.
Yeah.
So Isaac, he owns his own company called Port City Airsoft. And so he just kind of grew up with us owning companies, and I'm sure he could tell his own side of the story of this, but he finished business school in March of this year. And so he took his business knowledge and, again, like same as Jim did with passions, like he loves airsoft. So he's like, I'm going to start an airsoft podcast and a business and all that. So he's got Port City Airsoft running on the side, but he's our business consult for if we have questions, business wise, business law, like, so that's kind of his role in it. Caitlin is one of the artists. And so she paints all of the hand painted stuff that we do. Like she hand painted this zinnia before we put it on the purse. And she does a lot of the earrings. Isaac's wife, Caroline, they just got married in October last year. Isaac's wife, Caroline, she does a lot of the building of the products and some of the engineering, some of the artistry around it. She actually is skilled in film set decoration. So she does a lot of like the setting up how things look at the markets and things like that. And she helps run our inventory. She's brilliant. She's so gifted at what she does. And then, Zoe, he's not really involved in the company right now, except he's very good at being extroverted and talking with people. So if he needs to, he can do that. And then Ezra, you saw he was helping me with tech stuff, Yeah. We have him help us in the in-between stage of getting the products ready. He's kind of like the grunt work. So right now,
it's a good age for that.
Yeah.
He's got to earn it, right?
Yeah.
My son's going to be 11 in October, and he's already so much smarter at tech than me. So I'm always like, what do you do here? I don't know what I'm doing.
Help me. Yeah. But then on the flip side, I don't know about you, but I'm like, we need to go outside and see the sunshine right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We need to go get some fresh air.
You're going to do a couple laps before dinner too, just so at bedtime, I don't get angry at you. But anyway, that's the stage we're at. But no, with the kids and with involving them, I kind of mentioned I was going to ask you about this because I know it's come up not only in churches, but in companies. You see kind of this transition generationally, and it is a real tension to walk out, how you do that well. How do you do that with other people outside of the family involved and keep it healthy so everyone feels like they know which way is up and who they can talk to? Because the downside of that is, someone feels like they can't be a part of the team, or someone gets into a role they're not prepared for, or don't have not cut their teeth enough for the leadership they're being placed into. How do you walk that out as a family?
So going back to me and Jim understanding what strengths we bring to the table, instead of raising my kids how I would do it, which is really honestly the way that I want to do it, if I'm honest, instead of doing that, I try to separate how I would do it and look at who are they, how are they wired, how do they operate, and shape and mold that in order that they can bring who they are and their strengths to the table. I don't want that to get mixed up with, I just let my kids do whatever they want and they're in charge. That's definitely not the message. But trying to understand who they are and have an example of this. So Isaac, who's now 22, when he was I think he was about 10, he would, because I homeschool. So I would want him to finish a task and move right on seamlessly to the next one. As a 10-year-old boy, that's not what he was doing. I would notice that he would go off and do Legos, or go build something out of whatever in the backyard. And it frustrated me until, I think he was about 13 when I had him take Strengths Finders 2.0 assessment. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, definitely.
So some of the leadership stuff that we've done is, Strengths Finders, personality test, a lot of those, thinking wavelengths, things like that. So when he did Strengths Finders 2.0, I realized that one of his top 5 strengths is restorative, which means he wants to use his hands. He wants to build. He wants to restore. So where I looked at it he is just never on task. So help me. I have to go tell him one more time, for him, it was, he was done and didn't know what else I wanted. So he went and did what he naturally wanted and knew to do, which was to go build something.
Yeah.
So when I had to have a conversation with him, when I realized that, I was like, I'm sorry for getting frustrated, but here's what I expect from you. And then here's what I need you to do. Then I was able to go, hey, will you just come ask me when you don't know what's next? So that was something that we failed forward with and learned, where I was for a while just being so frustrated. I'm like, why are you going off and playing when it's time to work? Well, he was doing what he naturally knew and wanted to do. So that shifted my perspective with my kids. And I told Isaac, I was like, you're our guinea pig. I'm so sorry. I'm figuring everything out on you.
That's a good point.
And then
such a good point.
The youngest one benefits from all the knowledge of being a mom that I didn't have, and so really remembering, the individuality of my kids and their personalities and their approach. If I were to have my way, the house would run very, very, very differently, but they would not develop into who they are. you know?
Sure. Sure.
So there are boundaries and limitations to that too. It's not just a free for all, but it's a continual conversation with the kids.
That's really good. No, I'm thinking about, the kids and leading as a family. I'm sure there have been hard seasons as you're doing kind of all these different things at the same time. What has been the biggest learning season for you as a family in this adventure?
Oh, wow. The biggest learning season is when my kids see, there's 10 years between Isaac and Ezra. So this has happened kind of in slow motion for me. So it kind of all goes back to Isaac growing and developing from him needing me to like being independent. So as my kids get independent, that's the biggest learning season, because there is so much room for error right at that beginning stage of their becoming their own person. So they're messing up and learning and being late or mismanaging time or whatever it would be. But yeah, just like learning to let go and being okay with that. I think that's been the biggest learning season. And then as far as the company goes, like realizing that unspoken expectations are unmet expectations. So trying to really, and I almost over communicate in this area, but I tell people, I'm like, I would rather over communicate than to not communicate at all or to mess up. So, but I get really hard on myself. Like if there is a misunderstanding or whatever, I'm like, if I would have only asked or whatever the thing would be. But, I just think like communication is super important and it never stops. Like it never needs to stop. For our company, as far as working with the family, we pretty much understand what our kids want to do and what they bring to the table, but we always tell them, like, we play hard. My husband and I love to just have fun and play, but we work hard and we have to equally work as hard as we play. So there's going to be times where we have to do what we don't want to do or what we're not good at or what's not our strength. We don't just get to say no because we're not good at it, but really just pushing each other to do better all around.
I noticed something about that with you and Jim and with kind of all the opportunities you're leading together. When you talked about your role versus Jim's role, you've made very clearly defined roles for yourselves. And that doesn't always happen with a couple leading. And you've said multiple times how you've learned each other's strengths, but even to define not just what you're good at, but to say HR is where I drive and you drive over here. How has that made a difference versus maybe someone who hasn't taken the time when they've started up, as they've moved forward, to develop more specific roles as owners?
Yeah. Startups are stressful. And I think I told you when we were together in February, like, I didn't want another startup. Like,
you did.
I didn't want to do this again because I just want to like breathe for a minute. However, the why behind what we're doing was strong enough in my heart to go, okay, it's not about me. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring my best for it. And the why was for our kids. Like, we want to hand this off to our kids. So, and then just like staying in our lane, Jim is really gifted at task and management and strategy. I'm gifted in personal contact, HR. I feel like, I don't know if I told you this before, but I feel like once I owned the fact that, okay, I owned my attitude about it.
Yeah.
I feel like literally opportunities just kind of fell in my path, which goes against what I said earlier about not waiting for opportunities to fall in your path. But I realized when I owned my own attitude about it, maybe it's because my perspective shifted. Maybe maybe they would have been there. I just didn't see it earlier, before, but my heart and my mind were positioned to be able to say yes to the opportunities and the contacts and the open door. And but the way that Jim started was we ordered a CO2 laser cutter.
Okay.
He basically locked himself in the garage like a mad scientist until he figured it out. He's gifted in understanding the software computer side of it, the actual way that the machine works. He figured out all of the things that we want to do. And it was like months and months. We only started in January of this year. So he's still figuring things out. Yeah. So I think he's just now at the place where he's ready to cross train so that we each can all also run the laser. But he just kept coming back to, by the time I sit and show you, I can have all of these projects done. Just let me do it, which is his way of operating. And that works for now. That won't work forever, because if he's not here, if he's out of town or whatever, like we still have to keep operations going. And then I think like it's easy to learn a task. I'm naturally extroverted, so I don't know what it's like for someone who's introverted. I don't know how easy it is to teach people to connect with others, because it's something that I've always done. So I think it's easy to learn a task, but I don't know how easy it is to be like, just go meet people. Just
go sell to this store.
Just walk in and be like, hi, I'm Carmen, and this is my product. Would you like to carry it? Which is what I do. This is what I did to the Tybee Lighthouse gift shop, and I'm making amazing business connections that I see them as friends, like I'm like, these are really amazing people. I love that I know them and they're in my life. So I think I've strayed from the original answer, but basically staying in our lane.
That's okay.
Staying in our lane and respecting each other for it. But we also have to cross train and do the things that don't come natural.
The big leap. Yeah. Now, do you still have any staff overlap with the church and the coffee shop or any of those things, or is that fully separated now?
So in 2021, we had to close our coffee shop, Blue Door, and that was at the second PPP. We could not, anyway, agree to the terms and conditions financially, what it was, and long story. So when we announced that we had to close it, a customer that was a regular stepped up and was like, I want to buy the shop. So they bought it and they were able to keep it open for 2 more years. So it's closed. So it's not something that we manage anymore. And so there's no crossover with coffee and church right now. We have a coffee shop in our church that's open on Sundays. So yeah,
mine does too, and I desperately need it.
I know, right? And then with company right now, we have not grown enough to hire outside of the family. So yes, there's crossover with company, with Shift Creative Designs and with City Church. Isaac has acted as the creative director for City Church.
Oh, wow. Okay,
for
cool.
quite a while, even like as a young person, like he was involved in the creative side of it. And then since getting married, he's kind of faded out, and our worship leader and our children's director, pastor, like they all kind of take over juggling all that. And Jim's very creative too in that. So going back, like Caroline, his wife, works for us and does production at the church. And Caitlin, my daughter, same, production at the church and helps lead worship and work. So yeah, we're going around the clock.
How does that work culturally for the rest of the team? How do you just kind of make sure everybody understands that they all have a seat at the table?
You mean at
like
church
with
or
probably at the church, like with family and not family relationships, there's still a whole team that's got to work together and all have weigh in.
From the very beginning, Jim and I decided that if any of our kids seemed to be compromising in their life or in their well-being, in their health in whatever way, especially socially and spiritually, that we would pack up and move to Alaska. And that was kind of the joke, because I hate being cold. Like I love the heat. So I was like, that's the worst thing I could do, but I would do it for my kids. I would move to Alaska.
That's only funny because in my house, I'm like, I'm in South Carolina. So the winter's like, meh. And I'm still like, I think I need one of those happy lights in January, February. So
I know. So this is my, like, I die for my kids. It's like, I would move to Alaska, this noble idea.
I love it.
But, that was because we are not willing to sacrifice our kids for the church or the business or anything like that. So they've known that from the very beginning. And we have not pushed them like Isaac has done a lot and Caitlin have done a lot behind the scenes for production. We haven't pushed them to be on stage or to be in front of people or, push them to, you have to do this, you have to do that. we've let them kind of pick. There's been enough of a variety for them to pick where they want to land.
Yeah.
There's the conversations where it's like, well, we're the leaders, we're going to show up, there's exhaustion along the way. So it's like trying to balance, you can stay home this time, but, get some rest or, whatever it would be, through the week, if there's extra activities, just trying to balance the work and the rest, which we did that work, through some of the tools that we did with Life Rhythms and True North, that really helped understanding what refreshes you so that you can be your best version, bring your best self forward.
And we can put some of the stuff you've mentioned. We'll put all the links like strength finders and all that in the show notes because they are such great tools. And I know you and I did Wavelength together and it's a free resource. So it's so crazy to me. More people don't use that. And it teaches so much about how we're wired versus what we're trying to be is not always the same thing and how it can just suck the life out of you.
The freedom to realize, hey, there's a sweet spot that I operate in. And sure, I'll operate 1 degree left or right of that sweet spot on the scale for, I think they said like a year and then it's burnout. So, I mean, yes, you have to do things that are out of your strengths, but you have to figure out when you're feeling burnout and then what to do about that, which we have not always done perfectly yet. I understand now how to gauge that better, but having the freedom to go, I can't operate my strengths. And then knowing if I have to step in a little bit outside of that, like, what's my plan? I'm not going to own this forever. So who do I pull in that's around me, and I think it just works because we can pick up each other's slack. Me and Jim can, and our kids have kind of learned that. I guess they've seen it modeled, not perfectly, obviously, but they kind of see the rhythm at which we learn. So,
well, I enjoy watching you work, and it was so great to meet you and connect with you at that conference, but also to reconnect today and just dig in more because it is kind of a unique journey you've taken. And I'm hoping that there's a church planter listening or a business leader who isn't sure how to leverage those different strengths that can just pick up some wisdom from what you've learned. And I pray for City Church and everything you and Jim are doing. And I do still need to come down and get one of those wooden bags because it is the coolest thing ever. But thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything else we haven't talked about that you want to make sure you share?
Wow. I should do an outro for you. You did an intro for me.
Okay.
That's what I should do. Okay. But are you ready for the outro?
I'm so scared, but I'm ready.
Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you for having me, for giving me this opportunity. And I'm so grateful to have met you, and I'll be in Charleston in December, I think it is. So I'll connect with you hopefully and come.
Are you coming to like a craft show or something here?
Yeah.
Which one?
Christmas made in the South. Yeah.
Oh, I go to that one every year. So
okay. I'll see you there. I'll have a wooden handbag for you.
We'll also do dinner outside of that though.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on this podcast with Candace and myself. Candace is a powerful, dynamic woman who does so great in managing business, family, and personal relationships. I'm privileged to be her friend and be on this podcast with her. Candace, thank you for having me, and I wish you the best.
Thanks, Carmen. Bye,
I'll
guys.
See you later.
See you later.